entering Oklahoma's home opener against Florida A&M, there was no doubt that Oklahoma was going to win big. I mean, it was just a mismatch big time. We knew that when the schedule was released during the offseason, and we knew it was going to be a mismatch come Saturday night, September 8th. The question wasn't if Oklahoma was going to blow out the Rattlers, but at what point in the game would they get some serious separation? The answer was near halftime when the game was 35-10. Before I go any further, a big thanks to my good friend Reed and his wife for inviting both me and my son to his place to watch the game on pay-per-view. Had a terrific time, enjoyed some great food. Again, my biggest appreciation to them, and I hope we get to do it again soon. My son and I really enjoyed it. And it was a pleasure watching Oklahoma win big, 69-13. Again, we knew it was going to happen. So the big thing coming out of this game was going to be, one, staying away from significant injuries. Well, they didn't quite accomplish that goal with Tony Jefferson. Now, if you missed it, Jefferson injured his right ankle in the first quarter, had the ankle tended to shortly after. In fact, in the second half, I think the ankle had like a temporary cast on it. The good news, though, is that it's not too severe. It looks like it's a sprain. And remember, the Sooners do not play this upcoming week. They have the bye week before they have to worry about Kansas State, which will be on September 22nd. We'll talk more about K-State later in that huge win that they had against Miami, one of the most impressive performances on Saturday. But if you didn't get to watch the game, the first quarter, even though OU led 14-0, I thought both teams were extremely sluggish. We saw a lot of penalties. We saw a lot of disorganization. Both teams had to burn 2 timeouts in the first quarter. Oklahoma, I think, on their first series, had to burn a timeout in the first series because they didn't have enough players on the field. We even saw the Belldozer formation on the very first series, and one of the rare times where it didn't work for Blake Bell and company. But after both teams missed out on scoring on their first possessions, the Sooners finally got it going. I thought Landry Jones was okay. I didn't think he was spectacular, but thought he was okay. I think he went 19 of 28, had a couple of touchdown passes, did have an interception in the game, and is darn lucky that he didn't have 2 more interceptions, including on the second possession, in which his first pass in that possession. I don't know how the Florida A&M defender didn't catch it because it was thrown right to him. And if he could have held on to it, it could have been a pretty big gain. And Florida A&M might have had the game's first score. But Landry, for the most part, was consistent. Again, Kenny Stills was his main guy on Saturday night. I thought Stills was spectacular. Other than one drop touchdown pass in the first half, I thought Stills was flawless. A terrific game for him. I thought the offensive line did a better job of pass protecting in this game as opposed to the UTEP game. And, of course, the star of the night was Damian Williams. And I think even though you're playing against a team that you knew you were going to beat, and Florida A&M, they've got some nice athletes, they've got some speed and quickness, but they just don't have the football players that Oklahoma has. They don't have the depth, and they don't have the physical stamina to keep up with OU, and that was pretty evident as the game progressed. But Williams touched the ball only 10 times tonight, but had over 150 yards rushing, had 4 touchdowns, and this is only a night which he only touched the ball 4 times. So it's not about quantity, but it's about quality, and they got plenty of quality tonight. Damian Williams right now looks like your biggest home run threat for the Sooners, considering that the rotation that they have right now with Whaley, who I thought had a good game. Brennan Clay, I thought was one of the better games we've seen him play. Certainly, he's improved his play as opposed to last year. We didn't see Roy Finch carry the ball until the 4th quarter when the game was already over. And Finch did have a touchdown, but I really don't know what his future is as far as playing time, because right now you'd have to say he's the 4th best back that Oklahoma has, behind Whaley, behind Clay, and behind Williams. So obviously the coaches still aren't happy with Finch's approach to practice. He hasn't been very effective in practice at all through film study, as we mentioned earlier on the matchup show, as well as with practice in general. Coaches don't like what they've seen, and until he improves that element, his playing time is going to be relegated to merely kickoff returns, or unless OU gets a 50-point lead like they got tonight. That's about probably the only time you're going to see Finch play unless something big time changes. But right now, Finch is on the bottom of that depth chart in the backfield, and that's pretty much the latest on that. But a terrific night for Williams. And again, I thought that Clay was good. In the beginning, OU did struggle a little bit as far as run blocking, but again, they were able to wear Florida A&M down, and it was just one of those games where you're looking for some improvements. And I did think we saw some improvements tonight for the Sooners. In terms of the defense, can't really argue with the job they did. They were terrific, getting pressure on the Florida A&M quarterback. We also saw terrific pass defense. They did give up the one big touchdown, but that was when the game was 28-3. Demontre Hurst, the corner, he allowed the wide receiver to get past him, and it was a good throw. And the guy caught it in stride. The receiver just outraced Hurst, and that was really the only breakdown that I saw tonight that gained a lot of yardage for the Rattlers. And then even after that touchdown, which made it 28-10, the Sooners came right back. Only took them, I think, 3.5 minutes to score on the following possession. Again, Kenny Stills on the offensive side had a really good night. And then in the second half, we saw the other receivers get involved. And I think we saw the other receivers really make their mark in the second quarter, with McGuire getting involved, and also Sterling Shepard. Sterling Shepard, predominantly in the second half, was also in the mix too. The terrific freshman out of Heritage Hall. Didn't really get to call his name last week against UTEP, but definitely did on this particular night. And then we can't neglect the special teams for the Sooners either. Justin Brown was big time on punt returns. The first punt return that he had for a large gain happened in the first quarter, in which he actually broke a tackle near midfield and nearly took it all the way for a touchdown, but stepped out of the 4. And then later in the game, Brown had another big kickoff return, which was returned all the way inside the 10-yard line of Florida A&M. Justin Brown is no question a gem for the Sooners. He's got good hands, but he's also a field position changer. So that is one huge addition for this Oklahoma team, getting Justin Brown out of Penn State. The only key to this game that I made was improvement, and this was going to be thumbs up or thumbs down. I do go thumbs up in this situation because we did see some improvement, not necessarily because you beat Florida A&M by a wide margin. We knew that was going to happen, but what were you going to do offensively, defensively, special teams-wise? Definitely the special teams have improved for Oklahoma. Defensively, other than the touchdown that they gave up, I thought they were pretty good. Offensively, again, they didn't start off running the ball particularly well, and Landry Jones at times had some decision-making that made you scratch your head, but overall he had a good game too. But OU has a bye week coming up. I think that's terrific timing for them because they better get ready for K-State, who today I thought maybe had the most impressive performance considering that they beat Miami. This isn't the Miami, Florida of the old days where Michael Irvin and, that particular group, Warren Sapp, Cortez Kennedy, those guys. It's not the national championship Miami, but Miami still has terrific athletes. They still have a big-time tradition. The spread today was only 7 points in favor of Kansas State, but they absolutely made Miami look like they were in slow motion. Defensively, K-State was sharp, and offensively, they are going to give Oklahoma fits because of Colin Klein, maybe the most underrated quarterback in all of college football. That game on September 22nd, which will probably be on Fox, a nationally broadcasted game. It hasn't been made official, but the rumors is that the K-State OU game will be a primetime game, probably on Fox television in front of a national audience. Trust me, Kansas State is going to be tough for Oklahoma to handle. And the Sooners know that they are going to have a complete effort against K-State, especially against the zone read offense. So Oklahoma wins 69-13. They get the bye week. And a few thoughts before we close this out. Talking about college football, how about the former Big 12 schools all losing today? Talking about A&M. They couldn't hold on to a 10-point lead against Florida. Imagine that, A&M not being able to hold on to a double-digit lead. What's new? And then Missouri looked good in the beginning, but then Aaron Murray of Georgia just picked them apart, and the Bulldogs went easily in Columbia. So Georgia, I'll tell you, I was wrong about them. As a matter of fact, if you watch my college football pick show on the previous video, if you went against me on any of those picks, for the most part, you came out a winner. I was awful. Utah losing at Utah State on Friday night. And then talk about the other Big 12 schools, the former Big 12 schools that lost. How about Colorado losing to an FCS opponent in Sacramento State? Are you kidding me? And then Nebraska losing at UCLA, a bad loss for the Huskers there. And I'll tell you, Jim Moore Jr. making some good things happen already at UCLA, a much better coach than Rick Neuheisel. And then if you're looking at the biggest upset of Saturday, Arkansas losing to Louisiana Monroe. And I know Tyler Wilson, the Arkansas quarterback, got hurt in the first half. Still no excuse. You're a 30.5-point favorite. You should not be losing to teams like Louisiana Monroe. Don't get me wrong, a nice victory for L.A. Monroe, but still a devastating loss for the Razorbacks, a top 10 team, but they're going to go down big time in the upcoming polls. And then if you look at other SEC schools, LSU, impressive over Washington. Alabama, they win big. The Big Ten, they are an overrated conference. I'm sorry. They're not any good for the most part. I think Michigan State's good, and Ohio State didn't win by as big of a margin as I thought today against Central Florida, but still they got the win. But then after that, you really have to scratch your heads about this conference. Penn State, they're now 0-2. We mentioned Nebraska. They lost. Wisconsin only scored 7 points at Oregon State. Wisconsin gets upset on the road in Corvallis. And then Michigan, they struggle big time in their game, but they do edge out Air Force. And Iowa at home losing to Iowa State. In fact, Iowa only scored 6 points in that ballgame. You give credit to Paul Rhodes and that squad, but Iowa, I'll tell you what, is Kirk Ferentz one of the most overpaid coaches in college football? You bet he is. And if you look at the Big 12 in general, as of my broadcast right now, only one team has lost so far, and that's Kansas. And Rice needed a last-second field goal to beat the Jayhawks. A tough loss for Charlie Weiss and his Hawks. But we mentioned Kansas State's big win, Iowa State winning. Texas and Texas Tech both roll in their game, as does TCU in their opener. And Oklahoma State right now, as we're talking, they're in a dogfight with Arizona. Last time I checked, they were losing in the first half. And I'll try to put some type of a note on this video to update the final results, since when we end this, we're still not going to know the end of that game. That game not on television in the Oklahoma area, by the way. But once again, final score, Oklahoma 69 and Florida A&M 13. And one more note, good news for the Big 12 as far as their television future. They and ESPN, ABC, as well as Fox have now a 13-year television contract agreement, which will pay the Big 12 a little more than $2 billion over the next 13 years, and that deal goes into effect right now. And what that's going to mean, that's going to mean even more games on television for the Big 12, and that will also include more national broadcasts. So that's even more exposure to toward this league. Terrific news for the Big 12. Reminder, we won't have a weekly matchup show next week since OU is off. My next weekly matchup show will be probably, it's looking like right now, on September 17th or 18th. I'll still have my college football pick show, and hopefully I'll do a lot better on picks than I did this last time. Boomer Sooner.